So this is the Sony Xperia XZ2 Compact. It's basically an Xperia XZ2, but in a smaller form factor. So there are a lot of similarities, but there are some notable differences as well. And because of that, I figured the easiest way to approach this review is to break it down by similarities and differences. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's start with the similarities first, because I figured it'd be easiest to get those out of the way. So for the most part, the specs are exactly identical to the regular Xperia XZ2. It has a Snapdragon 845 processor inside and 4 gigabytes of RAM, so you're not losing anything on the performance side. It's a very fast phone. It's quick to launch applications, quick to multitask, and it also plays all the graphically demanding games extremely well. So there's no issues with performance on this phone at all. Other specifications are exactly the same as well. It's IP68 certified against water and dust. It has a micro SD card slot for extra storage, and it also has the fingerprint sensor, which is now on the back. And I personally like rear-facing fingerprint sensors, but I actually kind of find this one to be a little bit too low. I kind of have to bend my finger down a little bit lower than what is comfortable, so I kind of wish it was a little bit higher. But as far as the rear-facing, I don't mind it at all, and it actually works extremely well. It's very fast to unlock, very accurate as well, and yes, of course, it does work in the US this time. Unfortunately, there's no headphone jack, but the regular Xperia XZ2 didn't have a headphone jack either, so it's not really all that surprising. With the Xperia XZ2 Compact, you also have the same software and the same camera setup. But let's start with the software first. It's running Android 8.0 Oreo out of the box, and it's a pretty close to stock Android experience. Sony has always done a really nice job of just letting Android be Android, but you do have the usual Sony customizations like PlayStation integration and the Xperia Lounge, and there are some pre-installed bloatware apps like Amazon and AVG protection, but that's pretty much it as far as bloatware is concerned. Otherwise, it's a really clean and simple Android experience, and that's something I really appreciate about Sony software. Now, as far as the cameras are concerned, you have a 5 megapixel camera on the front, which is okay for selfies, but it's definitely not the best. On the rear, you have a 19 megapixel motion eye sensor with f2.0 aperture and electronic image stabilization. No optical image stabilization, unfortunately, but it actually does decently well in low light without it. Photos are still very well detailed with nice colors and very little noise. It also performs very well in daylight or well-lit conditions. There's plenty of detail, really vibrant colors, but not overly saturated where it looks unnatural, and dynamic range is actually pretty good. It's one of the better smartphone cameras that Sony has had in a long time. I know Sony historically doesn't really have great smartphone cameras, but I would say the Xperia XZ2 Compact is the exception here. The only thing I think Sony could really improve on is their camera software. It just feels a little bit outdated. It's the same exact camera app that Sony has been using for the past several generations, and little things like HDR mode is still really difficult to get to. You have to dig through manual mode in order to get to it, and that just feels really cumbersome and silly in an era where HDR auto is a thing on smartphones. Okay, so I think we've gotten all of these similarities out of the way. Let's talk about what's different. First off is the design. So overall, it has the same exact shape, the same rounded corners, and the same curved back as the regular Xperia XZ2. But the main difference here is that it uses a plastic back instead of a glass back. And I personally don't mind the plastic back. It has this really nice, unique frosted look to it. And the benefit here is that it doesn't attract fingerprints like the glass back of the Xperia XZ2. But the build quality is still pretty good, even though it uses plastic. It still has a metal frame that wraps around the sides that feels very solid. So I don't really mind this look at all. I think it's really nice, even if it isn't quite as elegant feeling as the Xperia XZ2. The second big difference is the display. Because this is a smaller phone, you're getting a smaller screen. So it's a 5-inch screen instead of the 5.7-inch display that's on the Xperia XZ2, but otherwise it's exactly the same. It's an IPS LCD with Sony's tri-luminous technology, and it even keeps the same 1080p resolution this time around, which wasn't always the case with previous compact phones. So it's pretty nice that you're getting the same exact resolution if you decide to go with the smaller version. A smaller phone also means a smaller battery. The Xperia XZ2 Compact doesn't have the largest battery in the world. It's only 2,870 milliamp hours, which by today's standards is considered to be pretty tiny, but battery life on the Xperia XZ2 Compact is actually pretty good. I get a consistent 5+ hours of screen on time, which is pretty impressive for a battery of this size. And I usually end the day with around 20% battery life left, and I've never had to charge this phone midway through the day. So I've actually been pleasantly surprised by how well this phone lasts in terms of battery life. The only other notable difference is that the XZ2 Compact doesn't have the same dynamic vibration motor as the regular XZ2, and this is supposed to be like DualShock except for your smartphone, where it'll vibrate when you're listening to music, watching a movie, or playing a game. And it's a neat feature, but it's definitely a little bit gimmicky, so I don't think very many people are gonna mind that this version of the phone doesn't have it. I think the biggest problem that a lot of people are gonna have with this phone is that it's not exactly cheap. It's $600 here in the US, and unless you really value that small and compact form factor, it's not the best option out there. The OnePlus 6, for example, has a larger screen, a much more modern design, dual cameras, and slightly better specs at a lower price tag. The Sony Xperia XZ2 Compact is a really good smartphone from Sony, but it's definitely not the best deal. So that pretty much wraps up this review of the Sony Xperia XZ2 Compact. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up down below. We definitely appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel, which is also down below if you haven't already. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. And of course, check us out on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, Google+, all that good stuff is linked down below. And check out the website as well, AndroidAuthority.com, because we are your source for all things Android.